Brilliant. Right. We'll just check that it's dictating, which it is, and we'll get going. So, Rupert, this is your final check, really, as it were, before hand-in. So it's really the last chance to mop anything up, answer questions you might have, check, we're on track for what you want, and also refer to the grading criteria. So we're talking about the criteria here with the new stuff this year in orange and the stuff we did last year in white. How's the project going in your eyes?
It's going quite well, I would say. I was having some issues with some of my assets, but I've been able to solve them all. So now it's just getting them all done, and then the blogging.
And do you feel like you've met or you're on course to meet your proposal? Like, is that something that's going to be achieved? Like the real-time strategy idea?
The idea of making the asset pack, yes, I do feel like I'm on track for. I don't think I will have enough time to be able to make or be able to test out things, but.
That was pitched. It cast my mind back a couple of months when you pitched it. That was part of the pitch, though, wasn't it? The extension was to have it a working prototype, was it? And then the assets were
it was kind of the plan that once I got the assets done, I was gonna try and get some of them working to make an actual demo.
Okay. So in not achieving that, we can maybe that might be something to talk about in your evaluation. It's not the end of the world. I think the idea was that it was always really your focus was on your pipeline of production, really, and making the assets, and so I think we can justify not achieving that if you just kind of talk about that in your evaluation. I think that's fine. Then context and research wise, in terms of what we're doing here, first of all, actually, is to just check the things are where they should be, which is why I'm referring back to other things. As you know, the main focus today is on practical skills, but we'll just check that everything's where it should be on the site as well. So we've got bibliography, we've got authentication we just saw. All this looks really extensive. This looks very thorough. Cool. Excellent. And so you've obviously been researching extensively. Your evaluation page, you've got your pitch video and reflection, and your previous one, fantastic. And then obviously after today's one, we'll add that. Oh wow, you had a 58-minute meeting with Sam, but you got a lot out of it, hopefully. So do you think? Did you apply what he suggested? What did he suggest, and have you actually?
It was a lot of what he said was basically my research was good, but I didn't always link it back to the brief. There was a lot of things where he could see how I was going to use this in my work, but because I hadn't specifically stated exactly what part was going to be influenced by this piece of research or by that. So, like, I might have gone through and looked at a load of games and been like, here's other, like, sci-fi games with similar genres, but then I never specifically said, these games are what influenced the art style, whatever. I was more just researching art styles.
So it's a bit like he was saying that the research is a bit broad or was harder to sort of pin down in terms of its influence on what you're doing. So that's valid, but you feel like you've addressed that now, do you? You tried to
mostly, there are still some bits I need to do, which is mainly just uploading images that are too big to upload here at college. So I got to do
what I would say is this: it looks extensive. Like there's a lot of work. It's clear that you're working very hard. When we come to the grading criteria for the planning and production side of things, the idea that there's continuous kind of engagement with the project is important. So the whole thing of subject engagement and commitment, I feel like we've got that in droves just on the evidence of what we see on your research page. If that's, I haven't looked at your production page, but if that's carrying over onto the level of depth in your production page, then you're in a good position, basically. Do you feel like it is? Have you been in depth in your production?
On the production page, not as much, just because I've only just started putting stuff on the page. I more wanted to get a lot of the assets.
So a lot of it's recently it's been in making, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
that's justified. But you know what you've got to do?
Okay. I know what I've got to do. It's stuff like that, which was I was showing kind of what other people had done with like the same sort of idea. And then this is one of the sections I need to add the images in. They're just too big to upload here.
Right. What are these going to be then?
These would be photos that I've taken myself primary research.
From games?
From the real world.
Oh,
and
I
stuff
see.
Like that.
Right, yeah.
They're too big to upload here, so I got to do them at home. And
Are they things from like our trip, or
from the trip, and also just from local areas and stuff like that that have been like helpful in my research. So.
Right. You've said so, like things like this. When you said what the PEGI rating is, have you then linked to that to say what you think would be an appropriate audience for your game?
I might have. I know I was listing many games that were similar that had it, but it might be one of those cases where I just have forgotten to write the line that specifically says this is what I believe mine is.
That's the key bit. So a bit like Sam was saying before.
There's a lot of research there, just not all of it.
Yeah,
links back.
Exactly, and it looks lovely. It looks really thorough. I think I'd come away from your page with a real strong sense of what the PEGI rating process is and what all the things are. But what I would like is the bit where you either highlight something, go, oh look, I think mine's definitely going to have, it's a real-time strategy. It might have depictions of violence, or it might have that in a low kind of graphic way, and I'm relating it. I see you talking about other products. So maybe it's like in terms of RimWorld or whatever, it's going to be similar. It's going to graphically have these traits, so it's going to be a PEGI rating that has that content rating. Yeah. So that's the crucial bit, really, Rupert. So I think what Sam was getting at is perfect. So if you can then make sure you just do a little bit, which is the last bit, which is like this is what links to my work. That'd be good. It looks very, very thorough. And you've got Keelan there in the video. So and you've been conducting, you're someone who's quite prolific in terms of sharing your work on Teams and getting informal feedback, which is really nice. You can capture that. I think that would be good to maybe have on your production page, to like when you've shared your work and people have either given you a little comment or said, oh, what about this? I know you talked about the other day about Sam saying about separating the guns from the ship, for example, and that meant you reworked it, which is quite a lot of work, right? But it's worth you doing. And I think you've produced some lovely assets, like really cool. With you, and the key thing is you've got your pipeline down. So you've got like a process, I think, now where you're really confident in, like, I can model this in 3DS, I can take it over with an unwrap. Sam showed me the ability to, like, more rapidly kind of get my ID maps, my color ID maps, to use it to texture independent components. Lovely, So this is all really good documentation. Is this you documenting your
the production process of the first few assets and kind of me having to go back and fix some of them? And then this section that I'm about to get onto is all of the other assets which I haven't had problems with yet.
Okay, cool.
There's stuff like when I was making the factory in the door, because I had learned a lot from making the turrets and the tanks, I didn't really have any major errors, nothing that caused any issues. So I haven't written anything about that yet, because I was kind of.
And what we don't want is like a repeating sort of thing where it's like, oh, I did, the same. You probably undoubtedly do the same thing for each one. I think the suggestions that I have for this page would be to try and intersperse a little bit of reference back to research. So, for example, like where maybe, I know I talked to you about this last week, but the consideration of the fact that the perspective that you see this game at would largely be much more aerial shots. So although you're not going to make a working demo with this in place in that sense, maybe if you get a chance in the final phases of the project, to chuck it into that template RTS map or component that Unreal now provides on a newer version. I know we don't have that here, which is annoying, so maybe that's not possible, but at least get it so you get a camera up in the air and you can say, well, look, this is my asset from the sort of scale that it would be viewed at. And then link that back to some of the games that you reference, So if it's similar to like the Star Wars games or whatever, or the Command and Conquer or whatever, they're like linking it over to those. Because like we were saying before, that's the key thing. It's kind of got it's really lovely detail that you've got inside these turrets or inside these compound units where the tanks presumably come from, right? That you've got details about decals and things inside them and all that stuff, which I guess that's got to be added here at the moment. I don't see that from the renders that you've got on there. They were the ones that you shared on Teams. So you've got details, and that's obviously showing consideration that in some of these games, the character you can see from the player's perspective, right?
There are some games, like some RTSs, just entirely stick to a kind of top-down view. They don't let you move, where others they do allow you to adjust the camera and look at like different levels of perspective.
Yeah.
So
and does some even let you possess the play?
Yeah, some of them do as well.
Yeah.
So
that's really nice. So otherwise, there would be no point in the interior, which I can't see on this, but in your render that you showed me, in the interior having decals inside it, right?
Yeah.
But because you're showing that and your consideration as an avid player and an avid consumer of these products, that. Then if I had the bit that joins that up, where you've got like a link to a game where you do have the ability to do that, you say, "Oh, my game would emulate that." That's why I've gone to the trouble of thinking about the inside of this building. That makes perfect sense. Whereas, and then equally, you're doing things like you've put a great big logo on the top, because I presume from the fact that you're considering the camera being far away. Yeah. So that's really nice. And if you haven't said that yet, that's something to make really explicit in your design decisions.
Yeah.
So I think like getting some camera shots, it doesn't matter that the terrain or whatever hasn't been made. Just do it in the generic sort of template map. But here's my asset in context in terms of camera. Here it is. That'd be great. I think other things as well to do would be to kind of go back one step and talk us through your, like, as it were, an almost tutorial of your process now that you've finally tuned, of like from 3ds to Substance to Unreal. Here it is, step by step.
Yeah.
Pick maybe the journey of one asset, or just even a generic sort of like storage container or whatever.
Yeah.
And do that and talk us through that. Is there any more like assets that you've got to make now, Rico?
I'm currently making the last kind of couple ones that I've needed to make. So
what are they then?
Some additional buildings to represent the factory going up in size, because this is meant to be like a medium kind of level, so like the mid-level. So I'm making additional buildings that would go on the side for if you upgraded
Lovely, yeah. Amazing.
So just little details instead of making it with all one asset. Doing it.
And you said, so it's like a building that would...
You would upgrade it once you got enough. 2 or 3 times, I'd say. So
that again is really nice, and it's something that you see typically with the genre, right? You see often buildings have sort of, like you say, 3 main phases of upgrade. So I think it's lovely that you're doing that again. Oh, here we've got the render that I was talking about. And then if you talked about that process, the design decisions, so you're starting with a base building that you're then upgrading, as opposed to making a completely new one. That's how it would be in industry, to obviously save time, but also for the visual continuity. So if you used terms like that about continuity, so that it's the same building, but obviously because it's bigger, it's got more chimneys, it's going to be, visually the cue is there that it's going to be pumping out more tanks at a more rapid rate, or that its loading bar will generate more rapidly, and then in its final expansion it's got like loads more bells and whistles. So if you link that, I think if you do a good job in this page of showcasing that against some analysis of a similar system in another game. I don't know, have you got that on your research page? Because there's so much on there, I might have missed that.
I think there's a bit where I kind of talk about games that have like a leveling up system, kind of.
Where would it be?
I'll
find it now.
I moved all of this around because Sam said a lot. Yeah, it's up here. Kind of talk about how this levels up and gets bigger over time, and here they have upgrade systems in these games for individual buildings.
Perfect. So if we then, this is Command. No, what is this game?
Dune. I think it's Dune.
Oh, the Dune one. Okay, but Command and Conquer's got a really similar style, right? So I think I would urge you to repeat that same information, or certainly maybe just look at a single building from Command and Conquer. Like whatever, or all of the Dune games. See if we get with this image search. I don't know. Again, you can do this in a much more sort of expansive way. But like a silo or whatever they were called, if you see the basic one, and then you get the different iterations. It looked like whatever. I don't know what this is. Is this an asset pack? This looks kind of cool though, but it's almost like that. It's like, so here's like a really basic level of a bunker, and then I don't know if we can see the same sort of building evolving. This essentially is what we're after, like seeing this sort of thing, which and how it kind of levels, and it might just be like height wise. So I think then if we get some analysis from you, where you acknowledge the key things, maybe it's like a few things that you start to spot when you see this happening. and it might be like, well, color's important. So, when I'm doing my next version, that I'm going to have more bands of emissive color, so it's like really like it stands out more on the map. Or I'm going to have like, I've made the tanks, or the guns rather. So maybe I'll put some gun turrets on the side, even though it's not really like. Then it can defend itself more. It's like more like a tower defense type scenario. Or maybe you don't think that's appropriate, but then you can justify it in terms of doing some deconstructive analysis of its like its color, its scale, its maybe proportion or texture or something else happening. Yeah, that'd be really cool. So I think that would be great. So have you thought about how you present the final outcomes? Like, what's your method for presenting?
Probably like a video of all of the assets kind of laid out in some sort of like a mini base, I suppose, kind of showing them off, and then just like the renders images underneath as well.
Perfect. Another thing I think you could research and maybe put onto your practical skills page research-wise is that idea of presenting them contextually. So like showcasing. I don't know if you get time to maybe paint a little landscape and just put a little desert terrain or whatever, or moon. I don't know, what terrain do you think it would be on? You've got ideas?
Probably some sort of. A lot of the designs I've gone with are hover based, so something with like rough terrain, I'd say probably like mountain.
Show it. Yeah, that'd be really nice. And even if you get the chance, they could be static in that they're in the same position, but maybe just like levitating a little bit or something. Could be really cool when you get your camera passes. If they're just kind of like showing a little bit of motion, so they're hovering, that'd be like lovely. And I think research wise, what I'd encourage you to do is look at the way that asset packs are presented in the Fab store in Unreal, for example, because that's essentially what you've made here. Like, this could be taken by someone who's making an RTS game, and then the next step will be to make these things have function, right? So you've made the consideration of the tank having these turrets that are separate, so they could rotate on their own axis. Someone could come in and blueprint the alert value, and it just spin round or whatever. So this is great, and that's what we want to have. I think the key thing really, Rupert, is the joining of the dots in terms of all that layer of thinking that's going into this, about the camera perspective, about object movement, about how it's presented, and then using that and showing that and applying it in the final pieces. Okay?
Yeah.
So that would be lovely. I think like if you get the time, make a little desert terrain for the context of it, lay all the things out, show them all in kit form, so the gun's separate to the map, like how you see them in the Fab store, or like that example that we saw, like almost like that grid layout of these. Here's my assets all set out. Here they are in a little scene. Perfect. And then maybe, if that was in Unreal, it could be that it's in the context of a tiny little sort of map level sequence where you make a little front end menu, put your branding because you've got your graphics on, just a UI of like play, and then it goes to the modular map where all the things are set out, and then there's like a button from there that takes you through to the scene, as it were, the little do you feel like that's feasible?
That should be something I can do in time.
And I think then it just really contextualizes it, gives it like all the things that you're talking about, and then there's a chance for you to kind of talk through and go through all the design decisions that you've made. It's like there's a really lovely like series of designs. I think they look stunning. Like when you keep sharing them on Teams and that you see all the detailing, I think the decisions around materials and logos and all that stuff is great. So again, like when you're making decisions, some of these decisions will be made on the fly when you're in Substance Painter, won't they? You'll be like, oh, I like that symbol there, or maybe I hadn't thought about that, but I'll make that glow. And this even down to the thought that you've got two different color versions for the different teams. Really cool. So in summary, let's get all these things that we've just discussed onto this page, which is a lot of stuff. And I think if we can pepper this page with research that links back to those elements that we've talked about there, like the consideration of camera position, the considerations of the context, the way you present the whole final piece would be great. So some research in and around presenting stuff from the Fab store and a modular asset pack like that. I imagine there'll be some RTS game pack out there already that you can have a look at. And it might well be that in your dream scenario you'd have more assets in the time frame. You can talk about that in your evaluation, but I think you've got an element of getting what you set out to have at the start. And it's like ideally you wanted to have something where you could actually play and click and these objects would go there. But I think it's reasonable to say that that's something that was always a stretched challenge, and so that's not feasible in the time frame. So in summary, I think that's the key thing to do. And then we come on to the so bulking this out, adding more research in here, and adding more process and finalizing what you've got down, and then finally capturing some formal feedback from your peers in the group. So I don't know if you've done that on the design process yet.
On some of the designs I have, but not all of them. I think I'm kind of more just waiting until I have a few more finished and then making like a feedback document for those to fill in.
It might be worth waiting until next week and building the map, as we said, with a little front. If you feel that's feasible, I don't want to put ideas into your make you feel like that's not. If you don't agree with it, please do. You can. It's subjective, okay? Yeah. But if you thought actually, if I go ahead and make what you said, and make a little front end menu with a play button that takes you, or with a button that takes you through to the asset pack page, and then another button that takes you through to the map where it's like the desert scene and it's sort of made to look like a mid-battle scenario, then and then get people to feedback on that. I think that'd be really valid. But I think it's really cool. Definitely, I think in the context and research section, we've got elements that we could, I think, push into the merit section for sure, and maybe even higher. But I think for certain, we've got some evidence of that. What we need to have is the research being ongoing and informing design. That's why I'm saying talking about how the camera positions, all the things I've said about that research is still discussed in the production page, and things like your production process. Because I see in here that your asset, you put it against a mannequin, which is really nice. So you've got a sense early on of scale. Did you make it to the right scale? Did you
I did. I kept up to that sort of scale throughout.
Perfect. So that's again something really high level, like one-to-one, doing things at the right scale, doing it at one-to-one scale. It sounds like a small thing because obviously you can just scale it up in Unreal. But if you were making tons of assets and it was for a game, and you were part of a team, which you've experienced a few times now, you know how frustrating it is when you give someone something and it's broken. So you can talk about that process. I think refer back to your learning and other things that you've done in other projects, basically. Lots to celebrate here, Rupert. And I think we've got some elements, but some bits at the moment might be down in the past area unless you kind of make sure that you add. Obviously, there's quite a lot more to add to your practical skills page. I think you've done the right thing in putting a lot of time into making, but that's been at the expense of documenting stuff on here. So we've got to really focus on that in the next few days. Okay. Yep. All right. Anything else? What's here? Are these placeholders for things?
These are just the main menus I normally use. I see. For
so that breaks down where things go.
Yeah.
Got you. Okay. Cool. So even in that last phase, like I say, if you decide to design a map with these elements in, it would be cool to showcase a little bit of a block out or a map design with those elements, like the current things that you've got asset wise in there. It might even be you think, actually, I could get time to make a really tiny little asset, like a little, underground bunker pit like that or something. If you get the chance to just spice it up even more, but see what you've got, or a little landing pad or something. I don't know, something that's less complex to do when you get it into the thing. But whatever you can achieve in these last few days is going to be really important to helping push that forward. Okay. Right. I think I've yacked on enough now. Have you got enough? Any other things you want to discuss?
No.
Okay. Right. Let's stop. So same as before.